I really want to take a moment to thank the people who clip me and put those clips onto Twitter and tag me. There's nothing better in life to someone's mental health, feel good mentality, when someone shows them they appreciate them. So I want to thank you again for clipping me, tagging me, and putting me on Twitter. Now, if you like something I say on my videos, please feel free to clip me, tag me. I will like and retweet you, and I will also quote tweet you. Also, stay around for the end of the video where I have a slight discussion about my beloved Smallville and the episode action to talk about the things that I really appreciate about that episode. Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. I am Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends, wives, and especially your boyfriends and your husbands. And if you're a subscriber of one of your women who loves me, I apologise in advance. You can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad, and on Instagram and on Threads at Movies TV Mad X, on TikTok, Mad Mickey's World, and on Snapchat, where they all come and find me. The ladies love me on Snapchat, BMouth60. So welcome to Thursday's edition of the DCU Daily. It is Thursday, right? I ain't got a fucking clue. Another heavy night in Iron Appa. But anyway, let's discuss superhero movie fatigue, comic book movie fatigue, and one that you don't hear very often, but now and again one or two creators have mentioned it. It's franchise fatigue. As I've mentioned, throughout the history of Hollywood, art is something they're rarely interested in. We have had artistic directors like Scorsese and Coppola and Snyder and Nolan and so on and etc., right? But mostly Hollywood have always gone after the money, which has led them not to make money. So what happens in Hollywood throughout their 100-year history? Someone makes a great movie that makes money and people love. All of a sudden, the rest of the studios look at that concept and say, let's rip that fucking off. So Lethal Weapon, the first Lethal Weapon, is a great movie. So what did they all do? What did the other studios do? Start making loads of buddy cop movies about a white guy and a black guy. None of them really worked, but they ripped them off. Even Tango and Cash is a kind of rip-off of Lethal Weapon. We've spoken about the Westerns, how they just kept on making shitty Westerns because Westerns were the peak. Cop shows, the action hero, etc., etc., etc. And none of that ever sunk their industry. But from the moment they all became obsessed with copying and patterning the MCU, it's when they killed their own industry. Many years ago when I was doing the DCEU Daily, before I started doing the DCU Daily, right, before gun-infested DC, I spoke about the lack of variety that the MCU inspired. The peak of American cinema was variety. A space for blockbusters, but a space for artistic small movies that weren't necessarily gonna make money. This is when Hollywood was at its peak. And superhero fatigue is a real thing. I want you to think about this as well. There were some years where we had 4 DCEU movies and 5 MCU movies. That's 9 fucking superhero comic book movies in 1 year. Are you surprised that the general audience are fucking sick and tired of comic book movies, superhero movies, and franchises? They've tried, ever since the MCU, they have tried to make a franchise out of everything. Name me one franchise apart from the first 3 phases of the MCU that made any bank. You may be able to find me 1 or 2, Avatar, but Avatar was a thing, I think, was it Avatar thing before the MCU? I don't know. So obviously the Jurassic movies recently have made money, but they haven't been good movies. let's not get that twisted. You know, the debate over movies, whether they're good or bad, always, you know, we always come back to the same old subject, box office. Box office doesn't interest me. Masters of the Universe is a flop. I fucking love that movie. There's lots of flop movies that I love. Box office shouldn't, anyone in this conversation today between us shouldn't care about box office unless you've got fucking shares in the studios. Rotten Tomatoes shouldn't be part of the discourse or what critics say. It's enjoyment. Was the movie good to you? Did you get something out of it? So now cinema is on its knees for many, 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 many reasons. And one of those reasons is how they embraced the comic book movie and franchises. And we're so fucking fed up of franchises. And I warned when they closed off the DCEU and announced the DCU that that was a mistake. And I might be boring by repeating myself. We should just be getting a comic book movie every 3 years. DC should be getting one creative to have a take, make their movie, then a next new take in the comic book movie character 3 years down the fucking line. Like we had with Batman 89, how we had with Batman Returns, you know, and different takes. Nolan's movies, Snyder's movies, right? But now we're full of comic book movies and everyone's fed up. Because Hollywood is an echo chamber, they hate outsiders and they hate outside voices, right? They don't listen, you don't understand. They're like, you're wrong, we're right, you don't work here, we do. Well, isn't it interesting that the people who don't work in your fucking industry know more about, you know, doing the right things than you do? People are sick to death of comic book movies, superhero movies, and franchises. But you keep on doing the same things, right? You did it because Hollywood have always been, as I say, obsessed with trends. And as soon as they see a trend, they copy it, they rip it off. They haven't got an original bone in their body. Right, one of the things they did invent was the comic book superhero. But even then, even they were ripped off from the Greek gods. So as I say, America hasn't ever really, in terms of entertainment, been very fucking original. They even rip off the great originality and creativity from Asian and foreign cinema and Americanize it and crap it out. We know that. We already know that, right? That there's not an original bone in their body. You know, James Cameron reckons he dreamt about Terminator in a fever dream. Someone else claims that actually he nicked that idea from them. And that wouldn't fucking surprise me, although I can't prove it. So please don't sue me, Mr. Cameron. Don't get it twisted. James Cameron is a great movie maker and I have a lot of respect for the man. But you fatigued us all out, right? We're so bored of superheroes and comic book movies and especially franchises. So what do? Now you reboot old ideas badly. We discussed the Wizard of Oz reboot with Amazon MGM. We discussed the Cobra Kai boys rebooting Knight Rider in movie form. I'm more open to that because these Cobra Kai boys are, you know, they have an entertainment aesthetic about them. They're not the kind of usual extremists we see from you, Hollywood, today. But you've killed it. You've absolutely killed it. You know, too many, you know, look at the movies out this year. Look at the Marvel movies. They made, what, 3 of them? They were all lame and mid. Superman, in terms of box office, was top of the flops. I'm still stunned the movie made over $600 million. That's impressive. Before you start shouting at me, no profit, didn't beat Man of Steel, I get it. But for it to reach that is fucking crazy. Now, I don't know what they did right, because it certainly, for me, wasn't in the fucking movie. But at the end of the day, this is what they do. They suck something so dry, but even after they sucked it dry, they keep on sucking it dry. Now let's talk about the Smallville episode, Action. The Smallville episode, Action, guest stars singer Christina Milian, a beautiful, talented woman. It was really great to get her as a guest star. So the premise is that Clark has allowed the Kent Farm to be used as a movie set as they're adapting the Warrior Angel comic. Just to briefly explain to you the genius of Smallville creators Alfred Goff and Miles Miller, they created their own comic book character for the show to have an analogy of a comic book, a comic book, because Clark's Superman's based on a comic book, right? But they've got a comic book, a fictional comic book within a fictional world called Warrior Angel, a bald hero that Lex Luthor found solace in reading about when he was young. So anyway, this episode is very, very fillery, but it has some very, very interesting elements to it. One of the commentaries I love in this episode is how comic book nerds lose their shit when canon is broken. Nobody broke more DC comic canon and Superman comic canon than Smallville, but the stuff they changed was all for the better. Let's not get that fucking twisted. Having Clark and Lex being friends when Clark is a teenager was fucking genius. That did happen in a Superboy comic in 1960 or 1960 something, right? Slightly different, but that's where they got that idea from. So the premise of this episode is someone is trying to murder this actress that Christina Milian is playing. And she's playing Warrior Angel's love interest. In the comics, she dies. But in the movie, she's not going to die. So again, it's commentary about comic book nerds losing their shit. There is two goated fucking scenes in this episode. There's one between Clark and Lex. Clark is so desperate to find the person who's doing this, he goes to the Luthor mansion to talk to Lex because he's an expert on Warrior Angel. And he's collected every single, version, each issue of the comic. So he goes into his safe, he pulls one out, and he talks about the issue when Warrior Angel's girlfriend dies. And he says this to him, and Rosenbaum delivers it as beautifully as ever, and darkly, it's brilliant. He goes, when you're destined to be a hero, you're destined to be alone. It's so powerful and so fantastic. But then we get to the final scene of this episode, because Christina Milian's character gives Clark a red cape for saving her life. It's now when Lana approaches Clark. Things have changed between them. She's become a much darker person since being involved with the Luthors and being married to Lex and all of that. And she goes, Clark, I'm getting really emotional now. I wouldn't want to hold you back. It does break me, this does. I wouldn't want to hold you back. There's millions of people that need saving. And Tom kills me with this. He turns around so innocently and naively and says, but there's not a million people in Smallville. He has no concept of becoming this global superhero at that point, leaving. He doesn't want to leave Smallville. He doesn't want to leave Lana. It's everything he's ever wanted. He's finally got everything he's ever wanted. He's got Lana, he's on the farm, he's able to save and help people. But the way Tom delivered it, there's not a million people in Smallville. It was a beautiful moment because all the Smallville fans could sense we were getting closer than ever to the end of Smallville when Clark would embrace his destiny of becoming Superman, but even then he's not quite ready. It's such a powerful scene. And this is what Smallville and television in general back then on broadcast networks were very clever at doing. You could take a filler, which was a bit silly and a bit of a silly premise, but you had a couple of dark, interesting moments. The reason I decided to talk about it on today's DCU Daily is because Michael and Tom, who do this Talkville podcast, were reviewing Action. And yeah, for those two moments, this episode is ever so goated. You can see how Smallville was such a popular Superman adaptation. In those two moments, you can see how these writers and the writer or writers of this episode Understood. Superman.